There's a lot of stories from the early rave days. Okay, so as you know, at one time I was the biggest EDM event producer in the U.S. and I was not the guy who started the scene, but I was the guy that commercialized it. So there were a few generations. So there was the first generation, people like Solomon Mansour. Um, I mean, he was really the guy, but there were like a few other guys, and they would do like the small underground. I came in when it was underground, and I took it to commercial. When I came on board, there'd be about 500 people out a night, and by the time I wrapped up, I was doing parties with about 20,000 people a night. When we first started, we were breaking into warehouses. When we got done, we were renting amusement parks. Okay, and it all happened in a very short span of time. As a matter of fact, the way I became the biggest EDM event producer in the US was basically it happened in one night. I went from zero to hero in one night. Now that's a whole story. Should I tell them that whole story? That's like a whole long story. Okay. So later on this trip, if you want, I'll tell you the story. Okay. So just sit me down and I'll give you the story. It takes about 20 minutes to tell you the story. It's pretty intense. And I turned it into a movie script, actually. One of these days probably get made. So anyways, what we were talking about was EDC. So one time you thanked me for EDC, and I obviously didn't throw EDC, but had I not done what I did, there probably wouldn't have been an EDC. I'm sure somebody else would have came up with the idea, but it wouldn't have existed as you know it today, and you might have not met your second girl, and there you go. So what happened was there were a few big boys like me. So I was the biggest, but there were a few other people that were, almost as big as me, and they were my really closest friends. They were my buds, just like our JV partners today, right? They were like the JV partners. We did everything together. Some of my best friends, one of my oldest friends was one of them, and most of them were in partnership. I was like the only guy that was autonomous, and I could do things on my own. I didn't have to answer to anybody. They usually had a partner, and what happened was once in a while, so there was me, there was I was one of the guys. There was Gary Blitz and Beej, okay, and Beej was my oldest friend. He was my former partner. So you know how currently I have my VP Bijal, who's like my partner, right? This was Beej, different Beej. Beej and I have been friends for 35 years. He's a famous DJ. He's a resident at Hard Rock in Vegas. So maybe you've heard of DJ Beej, and so he and I were partners. We got in a fight. We split, and he and Gary Blitz became partners. So then there was also Destructo, who's still around today, and his partner was DJ Kool-Aid. So what happened was once in a while, I would partner up with Gary and Kool-Aid. I hated Kool-Aid, but I partnered up with Gary, basically. We would do parties. So Gary and Kool-Aid did a party called Electric Daisy Carnival. Okay, that was one of their parties. And I would partner with them once in a while. Well, then years went by, we all kind of moved on. And as we moved on, Pasquale loved going to our parties. He had no interest in doing his own parties. Today he does EDC. He's the biggest event producer, EDM event producer on the planet. He really didn't have an interest in doing parties. He was just a club kid. But we all kind of moved on. And he's like, well, I don't want this to end. And so he started doing parties because we got out. And what happened was at a certain point, Gary and Kool-Aid weren't doing Electric Daisy Carnival anymore, and so he stole the name, and that was EDC. And so he went off and he did EDC, and just recently Gary and Kool-Aid sued him for the name.
Really?
Yeah, just to be pricks. And the reason why, there's two reasons. So Kool-Aid is a piece of shit, okay? There's very few people that I don't like, but Kool-Aid is a total piece of shit, okay? And he's broke now. I mean, I think he's got a little bit of money, but he's, he just blew it. And then Gary, though, who's Destructo, did very well. Okay, so what happened was several years ago he came back. So he kind of moved on. 20 years later, he came back and he did Hard. Okay, and he did it with Kool-Aid. Okay, so they did Hard, and he screwed under Kool-Aid. Okay, and took over the Hard name, and it took off like a rocket because Gary has a lot of resources. Okay, then he got an offer from Live Nation to sell. He sold it, I think, for $4 million. It was either $4 million or $8 million. And then they kept him on the payroll. Well, had he waited another year or two, he could have got 10 times that. So what happened was about a year goes by, it's probably a little over a year, and Live Nation offers to buy half of Pasquale's company for $50 million. Okay. Yep. And so Pasquale sold half the company for $50 million. 4 or 5 times what Gary could have. But here's what happened. Remember, Live Nation bought Gary. They bought Destructo. They bought Hard, right? And Pasquale says, "Look, I'll sell you half my company for 50 mil, but you're not going to have 2 brands. I'm not going to, take a chance splitting that." And they go, "Okay, we'll give you Hard too." So now all of a sudden, Gary's boss was Pasquale, okay, who he basically stole the EDC name from, okay. So Gary was pissed about that, all right. And so just recently, Gary and Kool-Aid turned around and sued Pasquale for the name, okay. And in the end, Pasquale just gave him a little bit of money to go away. My guess is $100,000 or something. He didn't tell me exactly, but he gave him a little money to go away, and that was the end of that. It was just, they were just being pricks. And and so now today is, EDC is Pasquale, and he does EDC all over the world. EDC Japan, EDC Mexico, you name it. He's done it all over the globe. He does 253 events a year now.
Wow.
The name is what you make of it.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, what was Microsoft before it was Microsoft? It was just a stupid name. What was Google? Google? What is that? Now it's just Google, right? The name is what you make of it.